Reserve. Some of you may be wondering what in the heck we're doing here and why we're not off somewhere dealing with that inflation thing you may have heard about. We're on it. But it's worth noting that the inflation thing is half of our mandate. The other half of our mandate is to promote maximum sustainable employment. And there is really nothing more central to that mandate than the cause of economic mobility and resilience and its centerpiece, workforce development. So I'm very pleased to be here. Yesterday we heard a lot about how business had to be part of the solution to the mobility problem, to the workforce development challenges. It also is the case that the solutions are necessary for business. So today we're going to sort of explore that duality with this esteemed panel, and I will let each of you, starting here, introduce yourself and say a little bit about why you're here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kanasha Paul. I am the founder and CEO of Black Professionals Network, as well as the program director for Venture Miami Opportunity Program, a joint venture with City of Miami and Florida International University.
Okay, my name is Shannon Jackson. I am the executive director of the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization. And our charter is to help grow our industrial base, maximize small business opportunities for our communities across the United States and in the health and human services arena. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Althea Harris. I work at the U.S. Small Business Administration office in South Florida. I have come to posit the idea that the solution is business ownership, and I'm looking forward to talking about that more. I've spent my nearly 30-year career in federal service, in service to small businesses, and I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Terry Williams, and I'm President and Chief Operating Officer of One United Bank. We are the largest Black-owned bank in the country, with office actually here in Miami. We just launched a small business loan program that with an SBA lender, Lendistry, and we're really encouraging our communities to take advantage of these SBA programs to not only expand businesses, but actually buy businesses, which is an area that we think needs more attention in our community. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bob Swindell. I'm President and CEO of the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance. We're the economic development organization for Broward County. So we work with Broward County and the 31 municipalities that make up Broward County. Our focus is on building a business brand and helping companies relocate here. We are passionate about economic mobility. It's untraditional for a local economic development organization to get as deeply involved in this work as we are. But we have made a commitment to one another and to key partners like OIC and the Federal Reserve that we want Broward to be a best-case example of how a community can promote economic mobility and really create career pathing for all of its residents. We are a successful, wealthy community, and it's unacceptable to us that there's pockets of our population that have not enjoyed the success and the economic growth that every other area of Broward County has prospered and experienced.
So thanks all of you for joining us. So we all sort of know the statistics. I think right now there are effectively 2 job openings for every unemployed person in the country. That's a level that we have not ever seen as long as we've kept these sorts of statistics. Crept down ever so slightly the last couple of months, but it's still historically high. So I want to kind of explore the idea of why that statistic exists, why we have so many vacancies and clearly a need to have people having jobs, and focus first on the skills gap. So to the extent that the skills gap is a major part of the problem, what is it that you think the business community can do themselves and in partnership with the relevant other entities exploring the issue to help address at least that part of the problem? So we'll go ahead and start.
Well, I think we have to first realize that a lot of businesses do not provide a lot of successful onboard training. And they put a lot of the ownership on universities to kind of close that gap. But with every business having a different process, a different system on how they do business, there needs to be a more investment in that initial training process. And I think government can also play a role in creating some skills training programs that allow the residents to be able to meet the demands of these high skill wage roles that we have. When I think about the work that I do with City of Miami and FIU, we have a lot of entrepreneurs, startup founders, like high-skilled corporations coming into the region. But the reason why those roles are vacant is because we don't have enough people to meet those skills. And so everyone pushes the back and forth about who should have ownership of this, and I think it's collective. I think that's why I love the project that is with City of Miami and FIU around at least helping women of color founders, but programs like that need to be increased beyond just from the founder's perspective. It also needs to translate across skills as well.
So I look at it in a larger scale. I think one of the things the federal government has really done with the executive orders that the president and administration have put out, the 13985, have really changed the game. I think it really put the foundation in place for the federal government to look across the board and how we get after some of those things to help grow those diversity gaps, increase the opportunities for our workforce. And then when you look at it, there's several things that have really occurred, and how I look at it is those documents that the federal government has actually put out has really helped us build the house. We start with the foundation with the executive order, and then we have the OMB memo, which is 22-03, which is a critical document. But those two, starting with those, really started that big process and really trying to bridge those gaps. What it did was it called out the federal government to now, we need you guys to establish plans and how we're going to reach those goals to increase the employment. And how I look at it when we look at small businesses, small businesses are really our biggest provider. One of the things that when we look at the budget from a federal government's perspective in HHS spends $9.5 billion in prime contracts to small business. That equates to jobs. That creates a whole bunch of jobs across the United States, not just in Broward County, but just across the United States. How do we improve that? One of the things that we have tried to do, and one of the things we're doing now as we move into FY23, is really work with our HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, and minority institutions, and really try to get some of those intern programs to help grow that workforce. We know that there is some gaps across the board, and we're trying to address that through some of these internship programs, partnering with organizations like OIC, partnering with all our federal agencies to help us grow our workforce and be prepared for the future. So again, I think it's a huge push across the federal government to really try to bridge that gap, create those education opportunities, and then really grow our workforce.
Wow, you all are so smart. And I'm really sort of perplexed by the question. And I think my contribution to this part of the discussion would be that we first have to, I suppose, establish that there is value in bridging the gap. And what I mean is establish value, acknowledge that across the board, right? If you have a business and skills gaps aren't your issue, maybe you don't care about it. And so I think for me, the conversation kind of begins there, right? That if you decide that this is an important issue, and I think we've decided that today, because look at the size of this room, and it's full. And you're here fairly early in the morning for this conversation. So now that perhaps we've established that filling the skills gap is something we want to accomplish, then we as organizations and individuals, I believe, must be introspective about what role we actually can play in that. We've heard that colleges and universities play a role. I know that Rick Beasley's organization, Career Source, is playing a role. OIC, Newt Sannon's organization is playing a role, right, trying to fill those gaps. We have lots of nonprofit players working on this from their angles. We certainly do it at the SBA in as much as if someone has decided they want to become an entrepreneur, we offer lots of training, mentoring, lots of resources to bridge the gap around entrepreneurship, right? Because it's more than an idea. It is, managing the books. It's managing the employees. So we certainly have a role to play in it where the narrow slice is the entrepreneur. So I think we all, individually and collectively, need to be thinking about what role we can play, and then come together around some of these solutions. I don't believe there is a one-hat-fits-all solution, but we should work together on this. I'm going to call it a challenge, not a problem, a challenge. And for us as a community to answer that challenge with our own introspection, our own contribution to the solution.
Yeah. So I'm going to use actually the bank as an example of how fabulous South Florida is. Because we actually have offices in Boston as well as in Los Angeles, and all of our growth in employees is come here in South Florida. And the reason for that is that there is a huge opportunity. There's so many young people out there that are really, really energized and wanting to learn. We do have a training program. It takes months before you actually can do a job at the bank. Sometimes years, but we do invest in training. But there's so many wonderful programs here in South Florida. I think part of it is getting the word out. I think part of it is recognizing, like whether it's OIC or Career Source or all these programs that are available to our young people, it's getting the word out to them that these programs exist, and it's also identifying the businesses that will train our young people. I'll also say we're located in Liberty City. We're located in our community. And sometimes that also makes a difference, and that we need to start investing in businesses in our community, and not just housing in our community, but also businesses in our community, so that people, our young people can get to work, And so, we're located near a train stop. People can get to us. And so, I just feel, and maybe again it's because I'm also in these other cities that aren't nearly as progressive when it comes to focusing on training and focuses on building, entrepreneurship. South Florida is one of the top places in the country for startups. And I want to say that's the other thing that's happening with our young people is some of them want jobs, some of them want to start businesses. But this is a place to do both. So I just think it's more getting the word out. We just happen to be here, and then it's just like, oh my gosh. And so literally our staffing has increased 400%. I mean, we are starting from a small base, but still 400% in the past 2 years. Because we see the opportunity in South Florida. So I just think it's getting the word out.
Well, thank you for the question, Dave. So 5 years ago, the Alliance decided to have a skills gap analysis done to Dave's question, we hear a lot about the skills analysis, and the way I approach things is I wanted to quantify it. So let me know, really by the numbers, objectively, where are the skills gaps and how do we go about solving them? A couple of the industries that we focus on are aviation, pharmaceutical manufacturing. These are fairly high-tech jobs, but there's some great entry-level jobs in those types of businesses. Two of the things that we did in the skills gap survey that were non-traditional, one was I said, I want to interview high school students. And they're like, well, they're minors, you can't interview them. I'm like, I'll work with the superintendent and the school system, but I want to get that interview included because we assume a lot about what students want, but I don't really know. I'm just guessing what students might want. So we interviewed over 5,000 high school seniors as a part of that skills gap analysis. The second thing that was unusual is I asked them, I'm like, identify for me the 3 most economically impacted zip codes in our community in Broward County. I want you to arrive at that number independently. I don't want any local influence on what you decide. Look at children in poverty, look at income levels, look at all the things you would think about. We ultimately ended up with 6 zip codes in Broward County that are our most economically distressed. And I'm like, I didn't know what I was going to do with that information or what the team was going to do with that information, but I thought it was important to have. After that, we launched a project called Prosperity Broward, which is focusing on those 6 zip codes. And how do we create economic mobility and career pathing within those zip codes? Because there were a couple things that I learned during this process. One, and I know he's here today, our retired former CEO of CareerSource Broward, Mason Jackson, longtime friend, great leader in this space in our community, shared with me that between Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach, there were 100,000 young men between the ages of 16 and 24 that were not working and not going to school, just totally checked out of the system. Now, I will be, total honestly, I'm a firm believer in our free enterprise system, and I think that if we create opportunity for folks, they need to feel like they participate in the system. But if you're 100,000 young men and feel you have no connection to the system to get a job, to get a career, to build on that career, and to be able to generate enough of an income that you can support a family, then you just check out. So when we hear the statistics that Dave just gave us about 2 jobs open for every 1 person available, and I don't know what that number is today. I'm afraid it has grown from 100,000. But how do we go about getting those 100,000 young men, all different races, back into the system and wanting to work? And I think something like Prosperity Broward, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit more on some of the tactics, but how do we go into the communities and provide resources, whether it's Broward College and Broward Up, providing those resources? This Prosperity Broward project I mentioned is co-chaired by 2 amazing leaders, Greg Hale, the president of Broward College, and Newton Sannon, the CEO of OIC. And they're helping us craft how Broward can do things differently. And a key partner in all this has been Dave Altig and his team at the Federal Reserve.
So may I add to, okay, so what I heard was there are a lot of resources. What I don't think I'm hearing, except now you just mentioned that you have a coordinated effort. And I think that's kind of really where some of our energy needs to go. How can we know who's doing what, and how can I intersect with you, right? Now you've told me, I've heard, and how can I intersect with you and you? I already know how we can intersect. So, but how do we intersect, and who's missing from the equation? So while you were thinking or talking, I was thinking, 100,000 fellows, where might they be? Like, where do people collect themselves with regularity? One, I know, is work, right? 2, school. I mean, people go to these 2 places regularly, and they go to houses of worship regularly. So, what role can the faith community play in what we're working on, this skills gap challenge, to the extent that even a quarter of them, are forced to go somewhere or willingly go on Sundays or Saturdays, right, to a house of worship? Maybe that is a place we need to look for partners as well to help get the word out, as Terry mentioned, because there's no shortage of people attacking the problem, I don't think, I mean, I heard everybody talk about resources and players in the space, but why are we not getting any traction? I guess that's my question.
So I want to tag. You know why you don't get any traction? I'm gonna be honest. Okay, I did this several years ago, and it's creating an ecosystem. Everybody has a mission to do something. So now you got separate people trying to do something, but you have to have one person, not person, but one organization to bring them all together. And it's a challenge because everybody has their own missions that they have to get done, and are responsible for it. One of the things that I did it in the cyberspace. And what we did was we got multiple people, whether universities, we got companies, all to participate, federal, across the Department of Defense at the time, and try to bring everybody together. Then that was the first piece. We got them together. And then the second challenge was, and I'll tell you, where I have challenges sometimes with my HBCUs, minority institutions, at that time I had money. And we were going to throw it at the problem to try to bring internships. And we were able to do 2 cyberships, but what hurt me the most was we couldn't get the support of the people who really wanted to, we were trying to bridge the gap with, and it was hard. And, one of the things that I've even as I'm in HHS and we look at the healthcare gaps in the jobs, my goal is to go back to that, build that ecosystem first. Who has the money? And now let's put all of the money together so now when we do programs, the yield will be jobs. Because at the end of the day, the academic piece they get, but then give them that on the job training, that's where our small businesses come to play a big role in that. I will tell you, that is probably the biggest challenge. You got all the people in here, everybody talked about resources. Ask everybody to put them together and see what you get. And when you do that, you can yield those increased opportunities for our younger folks, as well as bridge that skill gap. That's the biggest, and I would say that was my biggest challenge when I did it, and as we move forward.
The last thing I'll say about a challenge is, oh wait, we've changed our minds. We shift our priorities, right? They change. So there has to be some stamina among those who decide they're going to gather themselves together and tackle this challenge and stop changing our minds about what's important. Because we change our minds every 2-4 years about what's important. So again, for me, it's about making the decision that this is valuable and then sticking with it.
I would definitely add to that I think part of it is that we have to apply business principles to this problem as well. And we know that in business principles, you have to have a vision. And when I think about, for example, the education system, there isn't a similar model for the business process. Like when you think about it, if you're a business owner, there's the K through system, K through 5, there's middle school, there's high school, and then you graduate if you decide to go to college. But there's not that process in place when we're trying to organize the resources, set a clear vision, and identify a clear target audience in the business process as well. If you're trying to focus on how to increase the skills gap, there's a wide range of industries, and the skills gap includes a lot of different professions. So what skills are we tackling? So it's like, okay, is it for technology? Then yeah, you need to create a process from K, and if you want to increase all the way to college, you have to create almost a similar business process, and I don't think that we have that. And I think to your point, it's because we don't have a clear vision of what skills that we're going to tackle. We're not being clear about the target audience that we're trying to reach, and therefore you can't galvanize the resources and the organizations without those 2 principles.
So this is the easiest moderator job ever. And I do want to remind everyone that you can put your own questions into the guidebook discussion section, and they will be delivered to me at some point, and we can have those addressed. But I want to follow up on this discussion, which is fascinating and very vital, I think. Shannon's comment reminded me of a study we did, must be 8 years ago now or so, at the Atlanta Fed with the Metro Atlanta workforce development ecosystem, such as it was. It was hard to actually characterize it as an ecosystem. And one of the things we found out is that there were about 200 different workforce development entities providing workforce development services in about 400 locations. None of them talked to one another. And less than 30%, I'm getting the statistics kind of roughly from memory, but less than 30% had a relationship with even one employer. So that's not really an ecosystem. So I want to kind of feel you out about boots on the ground kind of solutions. So I'm going to give each of you one silver bullet and tell me how you would expend that bullet to activate, and in particular maybe the business community, given the topic of the panel, to develop this ecosystem and make it thrive. So whoever wants to jump in first can.
Bob.
Man, I thought a gun had 6 bullets at least, Dave. That's not fair. But you're forcing me to pick one, so I will pick one. I think it's a good friend of mine, Jermaine Smith-Ball, likes to say when we talk about collaborating on this issue is, Bob, she said, the Alliance has suite cred, I've got street cred at Urban League, and together we can break through some of these barriers because you're talking to business people, and I've got the respect and I'm well known in the community, and I think you do need those two things. So if I had that one silver bullet, it's folks from my team. I'm sure Tracy Verdes is here. I know Joe Vanchek's here. They're two of my team members that are focused on Prosperity Broward. Tracy, it's her full-time focus. And she's out meeting with faith leaders, and she's out in the community. So just break down the numbers. 6 zip codes touch 12 cities. 300,000 people live within those 6 zip codes. But when I'm talking to businesses like Amazon, and Amazon is adding a lot of jobs in South Florida. Now, these are logistics and entry-level jobs, starting salary of $18, $17, maybe $20 an hour these days, full benefits. When I talked to Amazon and said, listen, if we work with Broward College and we had a pool of candidates that took a familiarization course, call it whatever you want, a 10-week course, would you give those graduates of that course priority hiring that live in these 6 zip codes? Amazon said, without hesitation, of course we would. So then we have to go to the Broward County Transit and say, okay, we've got these candidates. How do we get them from their communities to these different workstations for Amazon? And they're all on board. So part of the solution, I think an organization like the Alliance is unique in that we work with so many of these different folks that can influence the potential solutions. But it's getting in the community. It's Broward College offering this 10-week course at a community center, at a branch library, in the neighborhoods. You don't have to drive and take 2 buses to get to a campus. You can do it right in your own neighborhood. But man, if you've finished that 10-week course and proven that I really want an opportunity for a better job, companies are hungry for that. But the silver bullet is people like me have got to be talking to these companies and saying, hey, if we create this opportunity, City Furniture is another great example. Would you give a hiring preference to the folks from these 6 zip codes that have gone through a program? Of course we would. They're all desperate for employees. So the time, if there was ever a time to do this, it's right now. I was saying this before the pandemic, and now the numbers are even more difficult for businesses in trying to fill those empty jobs. But companies want those opportunities. Now, I tell companies, you're going to have to change your requirements for what your ideal candidate might be because you're going to be going to non-traditional sources for employees. But you've got to change your own internal policies to make that happen. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful, and we're not going to see a real change in the issue of how people can get career laddering and get real economic mobility in their neighborhoods.
So if I had a bullet, I would choose teaching financial literacy in our schools. Some of us a few of us are old enough to remember home economics. Yeah, I hear the yeah. You know, the idea that we would graduate, you know, students without any knowledge, any financial knowledge at all, is just, to me, a really missed opportunity. Our kids should go into the workforce with an understanding of credit, an understanding of, you know, compound interest rates, an understanding of how businesses make money. I mean, even if you're a worker, it's helpful for you to understand how businesses make money to see how you're contributing to that money-making enterprise. And it's one of our passions. It's one of my personal passions. I actually wrote a book called I Got Bank for kids. We have a financial literacy contest every year for youth. We have an online, free online financial literacy modules at oneunited.com/learn. But the reason, but we're just one institution. It really needs to be in our school system. And so if I had a silver bullet, that's what I would use it for. So.
And I think that's right on target. And since my bullet is magic, I'm going to, say, gee whiz, if I could, I'd make everyone want to know financial literacy. And see, my struggle is, and I said even yesterday to a group of bankers who said the same thing you said about that there is a lack of literacy about financial matters that stalls or hinders the entrepreneur's access to capital. It's their own illiteracy that slows down or stops the process. Basic knowledge like, I know your accountant is trying to help you mitigate your taxes, but every year that you don't pay taxes in your business, you're screaming, I can't afford a loan. I can't grow. And very few people even know that, understand that. So I'm leading horses to water. I'm telling you, we're out there, SBA, we're doing it. We have programming up the wazoo. We have, our website is robust. But how do we create a desire to know what we don't know? Quest for that knowledge that is actually going to take us to the next level. You talked about vision. I'm saddened by how few people actually have a vision for their lives. So since, my bullet's magic, I would create desire in, because otherwise we're doing it at SBA. We're otherwise doing it. So I would create a desire to come and understand, because people do work, but they don't, understand the inflow and outflow of the cash in their homes.
Yep. So I just want to respond to that because one of the challenges that I think we have, and particularly in banking, is, I always say to people, banking, I now say can be, I used to say is, can be boring. And the idea is to, yes, I understand the desire comes from the individual, but we also have to make ourselves much more interesting, desirable, exactly. That's, the book that I wrote, it's a great story. The kids don't even know that they're learning, the basics of, banking. It talks about check systems records. It talks about money laundering. It talks about all the things that, they need to know and know how to avoid. But it does it in a way that is exciting. There's been this whole Bank Black movement, this Build Black movement. It's on social media. We use TikTok. We have to really meet our community where they are and not come about it in an academic way. You know, I always say it's not to say to someone, be financially literate. It says to them, you know, try to focus on the one transaction that's going to close the wealth gap for your family. You know, whether that's home ownership, whether that's owning a business, a profitable business, improving your credit score, having a will, insurance. Focus on the one thing that's going to make a difference in your family's life. And when you do that, you will become financially literate. Because we all use Google. We all know how to, like, actually, if we're going to buy something, if I'm going to buy a dress, I know how to research it. So if we focus on one thing, then they become financially literate. Whereas if you say to them, oh, be financially literate, or go to this class, you know, then it's going to be boring. So I don't know. That's my view. We got to meet people where they are.
I'm sitting. It might be magic. I don't know. I sit here and think about it, and really, I look at it as this. Being a small business is probably the hardest thing to do. What I've learned over time, especially during the COVID, we lost so many small businesses because of a whole bunch of things, but the financial piece. It took the federal government almost 60 days to do something. And that something was the loans and stuff like that. So now a small business, he has to float for that 60 days or whatever it takes for the federal government to do something in order to stop the bleeding, what I would call it. And what I took for one of my priorities as I came to HHS was, how do I make a more resilient small business industrial base that can withstand that? That is the partnerships with our financial institutions. That is our how we do contracts, ensuring that they are a part of that and understand some of those things. Because, and I had a conversation last night with some folks, and we were talking about, where small businesses, here's just one example, is net 30, net 60. When you think about a small business works with a prime, the prime gets paid in the first 15 days of the month. And now that small business, he doesn't get paid to the 30th day of that month. And now you think about it, when we hit the COVID, large businesses were getting paid. Small businesses still had to wait that 30 days. So now you compound, we don't do anything, and now the federal government, and then now they can't get a financial loan to float that time frame, whether from the government or wherever. What I would say my silver bullet is, how do I build a resilient small business industrial base? And it will start with programs like the SBA have, all of the, building that ecosystem, partnering with our financial institutions, because that's what we did at that time, with the relationships with the Department of Treasury and identifying the minority banking institutions and really working with them to help do that. But how do we learn some things there? So if I would have my silver bullet, how do I really help our small business community withstand another pandemic? Because you never know when it comes. That hit us, we were heels back, and it took some time. So I think we just have to learn from that, financial for small businesses, working with our banking institutions to ensure they're prepared. Because again, even the large ones down to the small ones had to make some adjustments to really help our industrial base. So that would be my silver bullet, and I hope it's a silver bullet. I just think it's just trying to bring the research.
Magic?
Oh, you said magic.
said
Okay,
magic.
magic. All right. Okay.
I don't know. I was like, I'm gonna treat it like it's a magic bullet as well. I was thinking through some of the answers that everyone said up here, and I wrestling between for the two roles that I serve, because it's on the trajectory of employees and employers. And I think my magic bullet would be like collaboration. I think that we don't recognize enough that we do not have to do this battle between employee or employer. We need vision and collaboration in order to realize that You are not defined by the business that you create. You are not defined by the job that you have. You're defined by the life that you create. And whatever pathway it takes to get you there, that's what you should do. And I think a lot of times, because why we have these skill gaps, why we're seeing this such a challenge, is people are not realizing that we're supposed to work together as a team towards a means to an end. It's like, I'm pretty sure no one wakes up passionate about creating spoons. I can never think, every time I think about random like things that are created in our world, I'm just like, who woke up one day and decided I wanted to create a spoon business? But yet, we know we need it. And I'm pretty sure nobody wakes up saying, I also want to work for a spoon owner. But they realize it makes money. They come together and they all decide that they're going to win from that joint collaboration of coming together. So I think we just have to be able to reinforce that all of this is just a means to the end to the life that you want.
Well, on that note, let me announce that SBA is interested in partnering and collaboration. Why? Because there, by our estimates, are over 32 million small businesses in America. They create 2/3 of all new jobs. They are significant contributors to our economy. They represent over 99% of all businesses in America. So to the extent that we have a place on the team, we are interested in partnering with you on this issue to do our part. And when you talk about a team, my mind went to football, because my oldest son, decided he wanted to try out for football, and he did. You know, he's strong and tall, but I think he did it in his sophomore year or maybe junior year of high school. And where he was going to school, they're serious about football. So I think he was a safety, if I remember. And so like he never touched the ball. And he was mad about it. And he was like, and he didn't sign up again for the subsequent year. So for him, it was this team, this enterprise is not for me. That's how I choose to think about it, because my son is awesome. So, and he didn't want to continue playing the role assigned to him. And I think that those two kinds of approaches to this teamwork needs to be considered. Are you on the right team, in the right position, or do you need to find a different team, a different enterprise? So I'm here to say that to the extent that SBA can be part of the solution, we want to do that. We want to partner here in South Florida around these challenges because, again, small businesses are employers, and they are saying, I don't have the people I need to do what I do, this enterprise, this contribution that I make to my community. I'm not able to really fulfill that the way I want to without the necessary employees. So, I'm the gal in the white dress. See me after.
So let me tag on to that real quick. So now let me just give you some other statistics. So now the federal government raised the small disadvantaged business goal from 5% to 11%. What does that mean? We need a whole lot of companies to do a whole lot of work across the federal government. Now, by 2025, it will be up to 15%. So now we've done a 10% jump from 5% to 10%. Imagine how many billions of dollars that is. I just look at right now, our goal for HHS is 13.04 out of that 11%. I'm going to fight it this year. I just want to let y'all know that.
Okay.
I'm not doing 13% again because it's just too hard to get there. But when you look at it, that's almost if I told you we spend $9.5 billion, that is about right now, as I looked at the numbers this morning, that's about $3.2 billion of we have to get to just to meet that goal. And that's where we're at last night at midnight. So when you look at that, there is a huge, we have to grow that industrial base to reach those new goals for the entire federal government.
And that's, I think, for you and me, where collaboration is key on this topic. Because the federal government spends around $800 billion every year. And even though the goal was raised, friends, we already smoked that 5% goal for minority-owned business contracting. It's already over 10%. The scorecard just came out last month. I know. And I hear you about your contribution to it, and I appreciate what you're saying, because the contracts that you're letting are not, you know, contracts for doing hair or nails, you know, that like my daughters fantasize they can do without a license, right? So my point is that it's skills intense. And so if we, as the federal government, are going to meet these goals going forward, we need to, again, partner with folks who are going to help us meet our goals. And when we meet our goals, that is going to have a positive impact on communities, because, what did I tell you? Small businesses create jobs. And the more government contracts that small businesses get, the more jobs they're able to create. Where? Not in the sky, in our communities. And so you know, we're definitely looking at partnerships that help us grow our small businesses in ways that are meaningful, that they can get access to the federal marketplace.
So we've managed to eat up a big chunk of our time. So I'm going to turn to audience questions, and I'm going to take them sort of in the order they came in. And anybody who feels like jumping in can jump in. How can we continue to empower those in need of training?
I think oftentimes is letting them know that they have the ability. We live in a majority-minority region, but when you think about how we approach jobs, a lot of, from women, from people of color, we think that we need to meet every bullet point on a job description to apply. And so there is a level of imposter syndrome. There's a level of insecurity when it comes to applying for these vacancies. And if these companies are saying that they have training, then just apply. If you have the, like, I want to join this team, I believe in the vision of this corporation, I believe that I can be a contributor, then apply for the role. And be honest where your strengths and weaknesses are, and they will fill in those gaps. I think a lot of it is a mindset, from a mindset perspective, and I think that we need to do a lot more work on encouraging people that they have what it takes.
I want to add to that. I also think that there's a need for Black-owned businesses. Black-owned businesses hire Black people, are more likely to hire minorities, are more likely to be in the Black community. And we also serve, as a Black-owned business, we also serve as role models. And sort of our young people see us as, I can do that. You know, I'm from, you know, small town, you know, segregated community, Indiantown, Florida. You know, I now own a bank. I mean, I went to public schools here in South Florida, you know, Martin County High. You know, I now own a bank. I mean, you know, I say, no, I mean, I say to people, I look for the Terrys out there. I look for the young people. I didn't know anything about banking growing up. And so I think it's also important to have role models in our community. And I say to people, I'm to be used. You know, you want me to come talk to your young people? You want me to, you know, that's what I do all day, every day. And I do think it's important for our young people to see other people that look like them, that are doing wonderful things, so that they can say, I can do that, I can do that.
I won't be long. contribution to the question is, yeah, how are we going to empower people in need? How are you going to empower people in need? I turn the question back on you. What are you going to do?
So I said I was going to go in order, but I lied. Because here, a bit of a follow-up or a related question is, will any of you have examples of ways that you have supported, advocated, promoted local businesses to partner with schools, and particularly middle and high school schools, to support career academics?
So I'll start on that one, if you don't mind, David. You know, a couple people have said up here on the panel, curiosity is such an important quality, and wanting to understand how things work and to create some desire to just understand the basics of financial literacy. So we work on one program every year that I'm incredibly proud of. It's called Claim Your Future Showcase. And we do it every year out at the BB&T Center. We have about 1,500 high school juniors, and we focus on the juniors. They come out. They meet local businesses that we work with, so companies that are in aviation, healthcare device manufacturing, advanced manufacturing and aviation, and other component parts that are used in more complicated devices. So you're just making the parts and some of the assembly work. But all the different jobs in aviation. And then we have partners like Broward College that are a part of this. But it's the business people there talking to students one-on-one about, here's how I got to where I am in my career. We do mock interviews. We do resume building. But I'll close with this. The most interesting, and it came up again 2 days ago, a top executive with Wells Fargo Bank was repeating to me his last experience at the Claim My Future Showcase. He's like, Bob, I went because you asked me to, and I volunteered, and I figured it would be, I'm giving 5-6 hours back to my local community and high school students. He said, I walked away from that event with such a better appreciation of the quality of the students and the high schools and the public high schools we have in Broward County. Now, we get juniors from every high school in Broward County. The first year we did this, we got about half. When the other principals heard how successful the program was, every high school sends high school juniors to this program out at BB&T. But they're interviewing on the spot as well, and they're getting opportunities to be an intern. And I heard offers made, as they talk to the different businesses. So tactical things like that we have to do. Now that's only 1,500 juniors, and I think that's a huge number. It's a lot of logistics to get the kids there. The school board is a great partner in making it happen, as is all of the businesses that are there. But the business people came back to me and said, I don't have any kids in high school, but I was so impressed with these kids. They weren't in their devices. They were dressed for work. They had great questions. They were genuinely interested in what I had to share with them as a business person and sort of what my first job was before I got to work for the bank. And I think those types of one-on-one experiences where you create some curiosity and some aspiration in our students is what we have to do more of. So that's just one very tactical thing. But again, that only touched 1,500 students. Now, I always tell the students, please, when you go back to school, tell at least 2 other people what you saw today so we get them inspired to do more, because there are other programs that are out there. But every individual in this room, we all have a responsibility and an obligation to work with our young people to create some of that inspiration and curiosity and what their career might be.
Well, just to piggyback on youngsters, we have worked with NIFTY, the National Association for Teachers Financial Education, I think it's NTFE. And every year they have a contest and business plan pitch and all that for young people. And so we're intersecting with them, but again, we're interested in intersecting in ways that are meaningful and impactful and will have the outcomes that we're looking for. And you talked about some really great outcomes, Bob. So okay. Right, white dress.
So one of the programs that we have within Black Professionals Network, that I'm super proud of, is our Next Steps mentoring program. However, we don't focus on the middle school. We focus on in college. So we partner with universities because our vision for our organization is to be able to impact 1 million Black households to create that generational impact. And so college presents the direct from degree to industry. And so with our program, they are paired with a mentor within their industry. They are given professional development. Then they also host an executive. They are paired with a different corporation to shadow an executive within their field. And then they close out the program with a pitch competition that focuses on teaching them the understandings of how a business generates revenue, how you build out your team, and then it gives them the perspective of figuring out, do they want to be on the founder side, the business owner side of a business, or do they want to be a team member within driving that business forward? So that's with our Next Steps mentoring program.
Go ahead.
One of the other areas that we focus on are returning citizens, or I want to make sure I call it the right word because the word has definitely changed over the years, but partnering with organizations that really work with community members that, we don't always focus on. So, for the bank, we actually partner with an organization called the Circle of Brotherhood. Leroy Jones, who I believe, yes.
Leroy Jones?
Yes, I just saw him. I think he left. But they do a lot of work with, members of our community that are returning from prison, that have, served their time and are looking for ways to integrate themselves into the community. We teach financial literacy to them. They go through a training program in construction or culinary arts. They come to the bank. Sometimes it's their first time. They could be, 30, 40 years old, and it's their first time in a bank ever. And so we, sort of educate them on banking and, how it's better to cash your check at a bank as opposed to a check casher. So there are also programs like that that are, really grassroots programs that are really important in our community.
And since you mentioned Leroy Jones, I encourage you to meet him if he's here. And if he's not here, find him. He has a very compelling story that I will not share. Hopefully you will find him and hear his story. And he, for me, is a model of what one person can accomplish. I met Leroy Jones when I first came to South Florida about 23 years ago, and I was stunned then what he was doing. And he's doing way more now. And so at the grassroots level, that is having enormous impact. And I think there's something about the way he approaches the challenges. And I think that Leroy values the one person that he's able to help. Whereas in government, we tend to be very numbers driven, right? Wanting to help as many people with as little effort as possible. Oh, don't tell anybody I said that. But I think, there is some measure of that thinking in the way that sometimes we approach things where, we want to get as, obviously, we want to get as many people as we can, but Leroy has really figured out how to have impact one person at a time. And having done that, he now has exponential impact. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so
Leroy Jones, find him.
as I said, this was an extraordinarily easy job. The only hard part was I couldn't bend time to provide more for us to talk. Before we close, I do want to say one thing. Bob had alluded to our partnership at the Atlanta Fed with Prosperity Broward. I mean, I can't tell you how proud my colleagues and I are to be a part of that. And from my personal point of view, it's sort of the gold standard for how you marshal a community together in a data-driven fashion to address the challenges of the most challenged people in your community. So with that, thank you so much for your participation, and thank all you.